Hey, welcome back, everybody. Good Friday. Hopefully, we had a wonderful week out there, and we've got some pretty important things to talk about in today's video, including that ongoing threat there in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico that we're going to be watching really through probably the next week to 10 days, maybe even longer than that, as we are looking at potential U.S. impacts on down the road. Now, there is still a lot of uncertainty in the models, and overnight, unfortunately, it didn't really get much more certain. We are still dealing with some pretty wide ranges here, and it's going to be that way probably until we can get kind of a center of the storm to try to get going here, a little less than a week from now. I think about 5 days from now or so is going to be the time that we can really start seeing this storm begin to form and organize. And then depending on the track, we could see a landfall within the next 10 days. But again, that's another part of the equation that's kind of up in the air. Other than that, we do have some other areas in the Atlantic we are watching for potential development. Also watching a couple storm systems that are going to cross the lower 48 here in the near future that are going to bring some pretty big time rain to some folks that I know could probably use it. So that's going to definitely be an important bit of information to talk about in today's video as well. Now, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Gerald. I'm a meteorology major at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and I'd love for you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I've looked at the analytics, and most of my viewers are returning viewers who haven't subscribed. So just make it easy on yourself. Hit that subscribe button, hit the little bell next to it. That'll keep you up to date with the latest model guidance every time I post a video or just post any kind of post on YouTube. It'll go ahead and notify you immediately. And trust me, I'm not going to blow up your phone. I normally only do a video or two a day. So again, it's a great way to stay up to date. Also, like the video, comment, let me know where you're watching from. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments, and consider sharing the video with somebody that you think might find it useful. With that said, let's jump on into that forecast because again, a lot to kind of get through in today's video. Now, taking a look at satellite loop currently over the Atlantic Ocean, I should kind of add here. A couple areas to note here that are a little bit more active that we need to watch. So we've got two areas out into the, not really main development region by any means, but out in the middle of the Atlantic here that do have small chances of developing into some sort of named system. Both of these, though, I'm not worried about. Even if they do form, there's not going to be any impacts to land, which is the important piece of information there. So, we'll monitor it, we'll watch it. Obviously, it'll be important for the naming, but again, they're both running a pretty low chance of development. Now, what is running a higher chance of development is going to be right down here into the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. And you're already seeing some shower and storm activity down there, and you're thinking, well, are we starting this process sooner than we expected? No, not necessarily. This is kind of pretty common in this part of the world. This is just the Central American gyre. And basically the way it works is it's kind of just a little individualized cell here of some rising air. Well, if I can draw that a little bit better, sorry. It's just kind of an individualized cell of some rising air that ends up sinking somewhere else. And anyway, it's just an area of higher thunderstorm activity in the world. And oftentimes that thunderstorm activity can find its way out over the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic Ocean and try to form into something tropical this time of year, and that's what we're expecting here in the long run. Again, specifically, I think 5 days or so from now is when we'll have the highest likelihood of seeing this area develop. Now, again, the other two areas both running a 20% chance each of developing into some sort of named system. So again, pretty low chances there. Our area in the Gulf/Caribbean here running a 40% chance of development within the next 7 days. And I would really expect that number to get bumped up here in the next couple of days over the weekend. This will probably be up to 50, 60, maybe even a 70% chance by early next week. We'll definitely be monitoring that. But again, most of the models do still develop this area. That has not changed. But another thing that has not changed is the models are not necessarily into much more agreement than they were this time yesterday. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive into some model guidance here. And I start this part of the video every day by prefacing, again, these are just models. These are not technically, or let me phrase it, they're not even, definitely not technically is a better way to put it, not what is exactly going to happen. And the best way that you can understand that is because they're all going to show you something different. So they're just different simulations of how we think the atmosphere and its conditions could lead to certain types of weather. Obviously, again, we'll take a look at them and kind of, dive through them and, look at the similarities between some, the differences between some, and how we can maybe formulate our own forecast off of that. So we'll start with the GFS model. The GFS has done relatively good this hurricane season at points. Other points it's done some kind of weird cattywampus stuff, but it has beat the European on multiple occasions with Debbie. It beat the Euro on getting the storm into the Gulf when many models thought it was going to go up the eastern seaboard. So there was a win there for the for the GFS model. And again, it could do the same with this one. Now, latest model, what does it do? Well, here we go. This is getting into the middle of next week. So we'll back this up. This is about Wednesday afternoon of next week. Again, 5 days from now. And the Central American gyre actually kind of pops out two areas. We've got one into the Pacific and then another larger, broader area of circulation here near the Yucatan Peninsula. And eventually that area near the Yucatan does develop here as it crosses the Yucatan and gets into the Gulf of Mexico. And a week from right now, we've got a tropical storm in really the heart of the Gulf of Mexico, showing up as 988 millibars here. And this is a large storm, I'll add too. And the GFS strengthens it, it moves it northward, gets it to hurricane status, gets it to major hurricane status, and then makes landfall, not this Sunday, but next Sunday, right into the heart of the Gulf Coast, kind of right there at the areas of Biloxi, Mobile, and then extreme west panhandle of Florida, and then works it inland in the 10-day range. So that's the latest GFS. Again, it forms this middle of next week, and we've got landfall by next weekend. Again, something I've been mentioning recently is look at the size of the storm. This is quite a large storm. It kind of goes from, we'll say, the western Louisiana coastline all the way to the Big Bend of Florida. That's a large storm system, and this is something I would expect with this system. Oftentimes, these Central American gyre storms kind of form this way out here. And, they take a large form just because of how the gyre works. So a couple important things to note with that is, one, this would make a storm surge worse than with an average storm, even if the winds are not quite as high, just because, again, you can think about a pool. If you have a small child, if you have a small child that's running in a pool trying to create a whirlpool of sorts, they might be faster than a really big guy, but that big guy's got a lot more mass with him. He's got a lot more energy. So, the waves and the surge would be worse with the larger individual, even if they're slower, wind speed wise in this example. So again, size is a big deal for storm surge. Also for just how many people feel the impacts and the wind field in general. This will expand the wind field. It'll probably deepen the pressure a little bit with a larger storm. So again, higher impacts generally. The one good piece to a large storm for us is it takes longer for the storm to organize. It's a little bit more difficult to undergo rapid intensification. And that strongest wind is usually not quite as strong as it could be if the storm was more tight and compact. So again, a couple things to note there. That's the GFS. We'll take a look at the European model now. And it's a similar story next week. We've got this area of spin near the Yucatan, but the European just doesn't really develop it as quickly here. It kind of parks it overland a little bit, and then eventually we get a tropical system by next weekend. So a couple days later than the GFS. This doesn't form until about 8 days from right now, right here into the Bay of Campeche, or Bay of Campeche. Again, I went on that little rant yesterday if you missed it, but either way, it forms here, and then it just kind of parks itself there as a very weak tropical system through the 10-day range. So the European model does not bring any landfall into the United States in the next 10 days, although it does form a storm. And I'll go ahead and tell you right now, I'm leaning towards the GFS side of things. And the main reason for that is the European consistently this season and past season has underdone some of these tropical systems in intensity. And also with some of the steering currents. Again, the GFS has won a couple battles there. I mentioned with Debbie, for example, it won that battle, at least at the beginning of Debbie's life cycle. Got a little weird at the end there. But again, I'm kind of leaning towards the GFS. Often also, with these tracks out of Central America, over the past 5 years or so that we've gotten these setups, generally they're stronger storm systems. And looking at the environment here, I think this one's going to have legs to get strong. Even if it's not a major hurricane, I think we'll at least get a stronger tropical storm than the European is suggesting. All right, let's look at what are we looking at? The Icon, the Canadian model here. This is, again, similar to the other models. We got a tropical storm, again, next Wednesday, Thursday forming, getting into the Gulf of Mexico. And similar to the GFS, the Canadian here pulls this north up towards the Gulf coastline, although it's kind of a weird looking, system here. You're looking at it here and you're like, all right, well, we got a really big tropical storm. And then you're wondering, well, what happens to it? It's almost getting pancaked, it looks like. Well, basically what's happening is it's already turning almost extratropical in nature as we've got this big kind of cutoff low to the north that is scooping down and kind of bringing it up. And then other flow out of the Atlantic side of things, or the Western Atlantic, I should say, that kind of just squeezes this and turns it into a big plume of moisture that works inland. So again, a weaker system on the Canadian, but that would bring a big time flooding threat for a lot of folks here as all that moisture streams northward up through the southeastern United States. All right, icon model, the German model, whatever you want to call it. Same story here. We've got a tropical system, develops it on the the eastern side of the Yucatan Peninsula, so does it in the Caribbean next week. Again, we've got a tropical storm by the middle of next week that gets into the Gulf of Mexico, and similar to the Canadian, gets scooped up by kind of an upper level low here by the middle of next week. And I know the pressure isn't showing up here, but this is about a tropical storm strength. Again, it's kind of this weird little moisture squeeze play that the Canadian showed. The icon is showing that now as well. So it's definitely interesting for sure. And what I want you to note so far as I'm going through these models is almost every model has been different in a sense. So that shows you the uncertainty, but what almost every model has in common is a storm of some sort of moisture field getting streamed northward. Again, I think no matter what, we're going to see impacts within the next 10 days or so. It's just a matter of what are those impacts per se, and what kind of weather do we get from it. All right, Euro AI model, again, one that has done relatively well so far this year, develops a tropical system here near the Yucatan during the middle of next week. Again, this is Wednesday. Most of the models are similar there, but differs from the normal Euro model and takes more of a GFS track, pulls this northward, strengthens it, and we have a landfalling tropical storm or hurricane into the Florida Panhandle by next Friday. So this is a week from today, a tropical system making landfall in the United States here on the latest Euro AI model. And then works that inland. So, we've got some differences here in the models for sure. And we're going to take a look at some ensembles. I think that might help kind of clear up, well, maybe not clear up the picture, but help give you a better idea of what the possibilities are here. Before we do that, though, let's dive into ingredients for the storm system. What do we have favorable ingredients for a system at all? Well, we'll start. There's three kind of ingredients in a tropical system. So number one, you need, excuse me, I had a great idea there on what I was going to say. It's like the, well, I won't mention that. But anyway, you need three things for tropical development. One is ocean heat content at the surface of the ocean, and you kind of need to go even a little bit deeper than the surface to maintain these systems. Two, you need light wind shear. Again, hurricanes are these big, scary things, but they're very fragile on the inside. And it doesn't take much to disturb them. So you need light wind shear or just light winds in general. And the final one is moist air. We cannot have a bunch of dry air. We need moisture to kind of help, fuel the storm here. So we'll go ahead and I didn't pull up the map today, but ocean temperature wise, it's not a problem. I'll just tell you right now, this is absolute rocket fuel in the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean. So that's something that you can go ahead and bet your bottom dollar on being there. So let's go ahead and look at the other two things, dry air and wind shear. Well, we'll start with the dry air and moisture field. Again, the green on your map here is more moisture. It's more favorable for a hurricane. The brownish colors are drier air and is less favorable for a hurricane. So we move this ahead into time, and you'll notice right here where the storm is going to try to form during the middle of next week, we got plenty of green showing up on the map here. Again, it will not be a problem here at the beginning of the storm's life cycle at least. Now, towards the end of the life cycle, as this moves northward, this is when things could get a little bit more difficult for the storm dry air-wise. And once we look at the forecast for the lower 48 here in a moment, you'll kind of see what's happening. We do have, some dry air over portions of the country next week, potentially that could harm the storm as it moves northward. But in terms of forming, that initial stage, it looks like there's plenty of moisture available. Wind shear. Well, again, the lighter colors you see here, generally the more favorable. The darker colors, the less favorable it is for development. This is, again, the center of the storm is going to be kind of right in this region. And generally speaking, it's favorable for development. We even have winds fanning out above the storm, causing divergence. That will help to kind of bring convergence at the surface and that rising motion. That'll help tropical development for sure. So that looks pretty favorable. And even as we move this ahead into time with the storm system, again, up to landfall, wind shear could become a little bit more of a problem. You'll notice some shear coming out of the west here. So some westerly winds could cause some, wind shear problems towards the end of the cycle up upon landfall. But again, still, it looks favorable enough for the storm to form in the first place. And also, again, I'll mention, once you get 10 days out, these things change with wind shear and dry air. Sometimes it's not quite as reliable of a metric to use that far out in the models. All right, let's talk about some steering currents. Why do we have different scenarios? The European, again, kind of trapped this down in the Bay of Campeche. The GFS pulled it northward, much like the Euro AI model, and the Canadian and even the Icon did to a sense here. Here's the reason. By the time we get to next week, again, at this point, this is kind of Thursday, Friday of next week. The storm is kind of centered somewhere in this circled area at the bottom of your map near the Yucatan Peninsula. Now, at this time, what the European and its ensembles are showing is a trough here over the eastern United States. And what you would generally expect to happen here is this trough to try to pull up the storm, but it just doesn't happen on the European. It just doesn't quite get that teleconnection there. The storm kind of just gets trapped there under a big ridge with weak steering currents until eventually it would probably get pulled north here, but it'd be further than 10 days away. The GFS and its ensemble members a little bit different here. Again, starting at the same point here, this is around next Thursday. Here's the storm, again, kind of exiting the Caribbean, getting into the Gulf at the bottom of your screen. And what happens is there's enough of a weakness in the ridge here, and the storm gets strong enough it wants to pull north and gets its way up near the Gulf Coast. And that's why the GFS, is a little bit quicker pulling this north and doesn't really trap it down in the Gulf of Mexico. So let's take a look at some ensembles here. We'll start with the European and its ensemble members. And you'll notice, again, we've already got divergence in the ensembles alone just within one model. So the European, again, a lot of these kind of form it here just to the east of the Yucatan Peninsula, then pull it into the Bay of Campeche and just kind of stall it out here. Others, again, pull it northward. You've noticed we got some spaghettis that pulled up near Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida. In fact, even a bit of a cluster here, I would say, near the Florida Panhandle that kind of pull it up that direction. So already infighting just within the model itself, and that's why we have so much uncertainty right now on the track. Again, I'm very confident this is going to get in the Gulf of Mexico. This is going to be a named storm, but where it goes and how strong it gets is still the tough part of the forecast in my mind. But we take a look at the GFS ensembles, and you're thinking, well, this looks a little bit crazier. This might be even less agreement. Actually, I would argue there's a little bit more agreement in the GFS just because, again, you don't have nearly as many members that are kind of stalling it compared to pulling it northward. Almost all of them pull this northward. It's just a matter of where. Many of them pull it over Florida. Some of them pull it up near Louisiana. So you get the general idea. We've got kind of what I would call a mean here, or an average kind of in this region with a landfall from Louisiana to Florida within the next 10 days. Again, this goes out 10 days, and all the members by 10 days are well inland into the southeast. So those are kind of the two ensembles. Those are the steering currents. Those are the ingredients that we're working with. And that's kind of the latest on what I probably should have mentioned ahead of time would likely be Helene. Again, we did not have Helene form off the southeast coast, never quite got a name. So the next name on the list is still Helene. All right. Now, this is not the only threat, or let me rephrase that. It's not the only potential area of development, I should say, that we're watching for. Out further out into the Atlantic here in the next 10 days, we do have a couple areas into the main development region that are showing signs of life, may try to get their act together. Could add a couple more names to the list. Name after Helene would be Isaac. So we'll watch these, and if we take a look at the ensembles, pretty strong signal here. Again, within the next 10 days for a couple areas of potential development out into the main development region. The good news is the very early thought is that those are going to maybe try to stay north of curve out to sea. Again, cannot guarantee that. But right now, that's kind of a track that would favor. So hopefully, that is the case and it doesn't bother anybody. All right, that is the tropics. Again, now that we've spent 18 minutes talking about that, let's talk about what's happening back home a little bit because we do have some active weather here within the lower 48. So we'll take a look at satellite imagery, and you're looking at this and you're saying, well, much of the country looks pretty clear, and definitely we did have one area of low pressure yesterday that brought some severe weather. That has pulled up north into Canada. We do have another area of low pressure off the northeast coast, again, bringing some scattered showers and some cloud cover. But the bigger area that we're going to need to watch is kind of right into here, actually. We have some low pressure kind of near the four corners currently, and it's hard to see on this map, but trust me, it's there. And eventually, this is going to work through the country and bring some pretty good rainfall for a lot of folks going through this weekend. And then into next week, another storm system, you can already kind of see this cold air moving down, is going to swing down out of the Pacific Northwest and do a similar thing and kind of track through the same area and bring more active weather. So definitely, nothing crazy looking on satellite right now, but there are some important things to note on there. And the good news is, radar-wise this morning, relatively quiet. A couple showers again through Massachusetts. Again, it's been raining pretty good there due to that coastal storm. Also, a couple leftover showers here through the Midwest from that severe weather we saw yesterday from the UP of Michigan all the way down through the Chicago area and into the St. Louis area, seeing some showers this morning. Even a couple showers showing up down here into New Mexico, which again is the start of our next storm system. Now, watches, warnings, advisories out there. Again, not a lot to discuss. You're seeing some beige on the map in the east and some gray colors. That's just from some fog we had this morning. Actually, a pretty foggy morning for a lot of folks there. So again, just be aware of that. Yeah, that's basically the only real concern. That orange area on your map near Oklahoma and Texas is for some heat advisories this afternoon. We also have some red flag warnings up through Wyoming, where fire danger is a concern, and even some frost advisories and winter weather advisories here through the mountains of Colorado, where again our next storm system is going to be bringing some active weather. All right, we're going to switch it up a little bit today. Normally we start in the east, but we're actually going to start out west today because we're going to kind of track this storm as it crosses the country here. So we'll go ahead and do that here. So this afternoon, Friday afternoon, again, showers developing through the evening and afternoon hours here as the storm gets going. So again, some showers on the backside here through California, Southern California, even through the Las Vegas area, back up through northern Arizona. And then a bigger area of showers through the Texas and Oklahoma Panhandle and through eastern New Mexico, specifically northeastern New Mexico. And that's going to be the start of this storm system. So not really expecting a lot in terms of severe weather with this storm. But you'll notice as we go through overnight tonight and through the evening hours, a couple of storms do try to form here through the Kansas City area. Could become strong to severe again during the evening and overnight. And then we get into tomorrow, and this is when the radar really fills in here. And you'll notice this is as the storm really begins to ramp up. And by Saturday afternoon, we have widespread precipitation showing up here on our map. Heavy rainfall through Colorado, portions of Kansas there, the Oklahoma, Texas Panhandle. Also, again, I'll mention, don't rule out a little bit of severe weather down here into this region, kind of on the southern edge of the storm system. Again, here's the storm. We get a couple more discrete cells here along the New Mexico-Texas border. Some of those could become strong to severe, so watch out for that. But really just a good old-fashioned rain here through Kansas, Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, and into the foothills of Colorado with some heavy wet mountain snow falling on the backside here through Colorado. This is getting into Saturday evening and into the overnight. Look at this very heavy, good soaking of rain moving through Nebraska, Kansas, the Texas, Oklahoma Panhandle, back up through Missouri and Iowa. Really seeing some good rain out of this system. Now, we'll move this further ahead into time here and switch to the GFS model. Let me move this up a little bit so you can read the words a little bit better. Here we go. Again, storm, continuing to strengthen here and eventually kind of working east. And I think by Sunday and especially Monday afternoon, things calm down a little bit in this region. Then we'll watch for another storm system. But again, the heaviest of this rain, I think, is going to be overnight Saturday and through the day Sunday. All right, well, what about the east? Again, some showers this afternoon through the northeast due to that coastal storm. A couple showers through the Ohio River Valley as we have leftover kind of front trying to work on through, although very weak at this point. And then we get into Saturday afternoon. And again, this is when you notice the influence of that next storm system really kind of working into the forecast here, again, out into this region through the plains. You'll see a lot of rain showing up, still seeing rain here through coastal New England, Long Island, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, seeing some rain there for our Saturday afternoon. And then you'll even notice a little bit of a short wave of low pressure here, or at least really a closed low here at the surface, I should say. It's going to fire up some storms potentially tomorrow afternoon. Some of these could try to become strong to severe through the mid-Atlantic, so watch out for that as well as that kind of swings on through. And then by the time we're going overnight Saturday into Sunday, the big story is going to just shift to that big shield of rain out towards the plains. And as we move that ahead into time, sorry, again, the map kind of not in the right place there. As we move that ahead into time, that big shield of rain continues to work inland, moves through the Ohio River Valley by Sunday afternoon, through the Midwest, getting some rain. Eventually, even by Monday morning, Monday afternoon, again, raining through Indiana, Ohio, Illinois, back down towards Arkansas, and seeing that even work on into the Northeast before another storm system behind it next week. So next week actually looks relatively rainy, at least to start the week for a lot of folks here. And you can just see rainfall totals now through the next week. A good little area of some rain here through portions of the Ohio River Valley, portions of the Great Plains here, Texas or northern Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, through Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, back through the Louisville area of Kentucky. Again, I know we need some rain out here in Indiana and Kentucky. I've gotten those comments. So again, some rain definitely on the rain. In fact, it could be, at least a couple of inches of rain before all is said and done next week as that rolls on through, with lesser rain totals, I think, down into the southeast, specifically Georgia, South Carolina. Probably going to have a little bit less rain altogether, but cannot rule out some rain. All right, taking a look at our 500 millibar height anomaly map for next week. Again, this is our storm system that we just talked about. This area of blue that you're seeing showing up, that is the storm that we just discussed. This area of blue off the northeast coast, that's the coastal storm we discussed. As we go through next week, again, moving across the country, but another storm system behind it getting going here. And this kind of turns into a cutoff low by next week. This is next Thursday. So this is what some of our models were hitting at with the hurricane, almost this cutoff low combining with this system in the Gulf, and they both kind of just make a big old rainy mess through portions of the southeast and Ohio River Valley next week. So we'll watch that idea here. Again, though, this low just getting cut off and trapped under this giant ridge. It's gonna play havoc on the forecast here. And the old saying is upper level low, weatherman woes. So or a weatherman's woe, whatever, or however you want to say it, but you get the point. So that'll cause definitely some problems in the forecast here, and that'll be a tough one. But again, by the time we get to the end of next week, we could be dealing with a landfalling tropical system. So I need to watch out for that. And just what could this look like on radar? Again, just a rainy week as multiple storm systems cross through, and then that upper level low, again, just bringing constant rain showers through the Ohio River Valley, through the deep south, and then it could even pull that storm north. And then again, we can have a tropical system to worry about as well there in the long run. So again, a tougher forecast in the long range, but again, I do see some rain in the forecast for somebody. Now, temperature-wise, unfortunately, again, we are still trapped under this giant ridge, so it does look above average, relatively speaking, for the next 6 to 10 days. Again, if we get this cutoff low in here, that could definitely cool things down for somebody. But overall, this big ridge is still, keeping us relatively warm. Rainfall-wise, looks much rainier in the east, but again, before this 6 to 10 day range, we're going to see some rain into this region as well. So, don't let this map fool you too much. Because again, it's 6 to 10 days. It's not right now to 10 days. It's 6 to 10 days. So that's the latest here that I got for you. Again, a bit of a long video, but a lot to discuss. Tropical trouble, trouble back through the lower 48 in that forecast. Just a whole bunch going on out there. So with that said, y'all have a wonderful rest of your Friday. Stay safe out there. Keep an eye to the sky, and I'll see you all tomorrow.